Hi, I'm Derek Williams, and I did my research project on the globalization of KFC in China. I did this research so I could compare KFC's globalization to George Ritzer's theory of globalization as described in his book Globalization Nothing To. In his book, Ritzer describes a nothing to something and local to global continuum as shown here behind me. And just so everybody is on the same page, local means to be strongly influenced by local culture and the local people, while globalized items tend to be heavily influenced by large global forces. Whereas on the something to nothing end, somethings are defined as one-of-a-kind unique items that may be only found in one specific location, and nothings are culturally devoid and are generally can be bought or found worldwide. Based on this continuum, Ritzer says that as items and companies globalize, they tend to shift away from the global and something end, where they generally start, and shift towards the global and nothing end of the scale. After my research on KFC, I found that Ritzer's theory was not completely right in regards to KFC's globalization in China. I found the company as a whole to fall somewhere in the middle of the graph, around right here. And I came to this conclusion after researching four main components of KFC. The components that I looked at were the business model of KFC, size and staffing of each restaurant, the menu items available in each restaurant, and the supply networks. I'd like to start out by talking about KFC's business model. In the United States, many fast food restaurants are highly franchised, and according to the article Franchising in China, Legal Challenges When First Entering the Chinese Market, the researchers found that 88% of the KFC restaurants in the United States are franchised. However, when KFC entered the Chinese market, franchising was an unfamiliar business model, and the company struggled to find franchisees to open restaurants for them. To deal with this situation, the company began to open a large amount of corporate-owned restaurants. And since the company owned such a large amount of the restaurants, they had a strong influence of what happened in those restaurants, such as the decor, the menu items, staffing. So I would consider that really global because there really was no local influence. Because in the United States, when a franchisee owns a restaurant, they generally live in that location, and they have an idea of what the local needs are, and they can help that restaurant adapt to meet those needs. And so, United States KFC kind of are towards the local end, but the KFCs in China are definitely more towards the global end because the company has such a large influence on such a large portion of restaurants. And so I'm going to put this mark here, and for business model, because that's where I feel business model lands on the scale, because you can't really look at the something to nothing, because there really isn't an item to look at here, and so that's why I placed it right in the middle of the graph, and then more towards the global end for reasons I just explained. Moving to the next component I researched, which was the size and staffing. In China, KFC noticed a large increase in the amount of dine-in customers when compared to their United States restaurants. In response to this, KFC doubled the size of their restaurants in China and staffed more people. One of the additional jobs added was a hostess. The hostess at each restaurant taught people English songs and coordinated local games for children. And Looking at KFC as a whole, I believe this component falls exactly in the middle of the continuum due to the changes KFC made to accommodate the local trends of Chinese customers. The Hostess is a completely new job from the United States. So United States and KFCs are like nothing. If you go to one KFC, you expect exactly the same thing. And the same in China. If you go to one KFC, you expect the exact same thing. But looking at comparing the United States KFCs and Chinese KFCs, those are completely different. And so I would consider KFCs in China to be more of something, and KFCs in the United States more of a nothing. And that's why I'll put the size and stacking dot right here, because I feel like those two kind of cancel out. And this is also an example of Ritzer's idea of cultural hybridization, which simply is the mixture of cultural elements from different cultures in different parts of the world. In this case, KFC influenced the consumer by introducing fast food in a friendly environment, while the consumer responded to this by patronizing KFC. But in contrast to American customers, they stayed inside of the restaurant longer to enjoy the atmosphere and to enjoy their food. The next component to be discussed is one that I found to highly contradict Ritzer. This component is the menu items in each restaurant. According to the article, a study of the food crisis and national and global challenges of fast food in China, the researchers mentioned that out of all the Western fast food chains that have globalized into China, KFC has gone the farthest to modify their menu to meet the taste of the new Chinese customers. Although original recipe chicken is still on the menu at all restaurants in China, Chinese KFC offer a wide variety of foods that are not available in the United States. Some examples of this that I found were really interesting are lotus roots, bamboo shoots, egg tarts, and soy milk drinks. And I feel like these additions to the menu make KFC in the United States and KFC China highly different from each other, which leads me to believe KFC is more of something. But what really convinced me that KFC's menu items are something is that in each city in KFC, the company has developed the different sauces to be sold in those restaurants. And they found that in some of the restaurants, the customers there felt the food was too bland. So KFC developed some spicier sauces so those customers were satisfied. But in other cities, they found the foods to be too spicy. So KFC introduced some sweeter sauces there. So the food at KFC can be considered something, because if you go to one restaurant, you may find completely different sauces or chicken than if you were to go to KFC in a different city. And because of this, I'm going to place this circle right here for menu items. Although some of the components I talked about so far do somewhat coincide with Richard's theory, aside from the menu items, I believe this last component of supply networks highly coincides with Richard's ideas. When KFC first entered China, the supply network chains that deliver the food to each restaurant did not exist like we have in the United States. And to cope with this, corporate leaders decided to build their own supply networks and hire their own truckers and food warehouses. And in the article, KFC in China, Secret Recipe, in the article, KFC in China, Secret Recipe for Success, The researcher interviewed a KFC China corporate leader, and he stated that the Chinese KFCs adapted the supply networks like in the United States because it allowed for improvement in quality control, standardization of products, and better oversight of supplier relations. I feel like the standardization of products is the key phrase to get out of there because it took something that was a global something in Kentucky, which is the original rustic chicken, and globalized it into China, making it a global nothing. And so that's why I feel like supply networks fall right here onto the scale. And so overall, I feel like all of these components average out to be right here on the continuum. And this is slightly different than what Richard would suggest because he would say that KFC would fall right here onto the continuum. But I feel like the important thing to get out of this research is that not all companies are the same, and each component of the company should be analyzed separately and placed on the graph, and then it should be determined where it falls on the continuum, and not just assume that all companies follow this global to nothing pathway. Thank you.